छोटा सा वीडियो है, we'll start with that.
Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, a way of life unchanged in thousands of years is now under increasing threat. The Jarawa people is said to be among the first to have migrated from Africa thousands of years ago as part of the early evolution of our planet and our population. Their way of life is protected by law. They live in a vast zone, its perimeter guarded by the military for the conservation of their way of life. But more and more, the outside world is getting in. Poachers stealing the wild boar the Jarawas hunt for their food. Criminals selling this as bushmeat at illegal markets. The overall effect on the Jarawas could mean their extinction. There are only just over 400 of them left. Our reports from India. The Jarawas want to have self-rule over their land to preserve their traditions. The Indian government seems more concerned with developing tourism. And the risks, well, it could turn the Jarawas' lifestyle into a human zoo. Alexandre Durance has this.
Meeting the Jarawa is not a task for the faint-hearted. They live on one of the largest islands of the Andaman archipelago off the coast of India. There are no more than 420 of them. Reaching them means trekking 115 kilometers across their reserve. After walking for several days, we finally made contact. For 35,000 years, the Jarawa had no contact at all with the outside world.
Let's see who can shoot the furthest.
Recent studies indicate they were amongst the very first peoples to have migrated from Africa to the rest of the world.
I'm going to try again. This time it'll really go far.
In theory, the Jarawa Reserve is protected by the Indian Army and access is prohibited. But since 2012, contact with Indians living on the other side of the island has increased. Now, tourists and poachers are threatening their fragile way of life. More than once, tribesmen have traveled to meet with the authorities, but their complaints have been ignored. That is why we decided to break the ban and meet them to hear their side of the story.
We lead a peaceful existence in the forest, and we're happy. We have everything we need here. The trees bear a lot of fruit, and the flowers are magnificent.
Here, everything is beautiful and peaceful. We like sharing everything. We are all together. And we only hunt what we need.
But before, there were no strangers here. Today, they're getting closer and closer to us.
The Jarawa are pygmies and hunter-gatherers. Their way of life has hardly changed since the Stone Age. The change has come quickly, and they now have tools, torches, and kitchenware. And they have started wearing clothes. Most of their possessions were given to them by the park rangers. Rangers who were created by the Indian government to protect the Jarawa from the outside world. Since then, however, their way of life has been changed forever.
Before, there were no metal pots, There were no metal dishes.
Sometimes you have to walk at night, but it's too dark. In the past, we used to make candles from beeswax. But today, we have torches. The Indians give them to us. They provide more light and save us from darkness.
Today was all of that. Things have changed. Today, we can walk at night.
In the early hours of the morning, the men go hunting. But there's a constant fear of running into outsiders. In spite of the rangers' patrols, dozens of armed poachers hunt with impunity on their land.
There are armed poachers who shoot at us. They steal from us. They try to scare us.
They want to buy wild pigs from us. They set traps to catch them. They kill our pigs. Sometimes they even give us a little money or clothes. That's how they steal our game.
Before, we only ate pigs, but now there are hardly any left. We were forced to hunt deer for food.
We don't know what to do anymore.
We sit down and think about all that.
We think about it all the time.
After the wild pigs, it's deer. Their numbers have decreased dramatically since the poachers forced the Jarawa to hunt for them. Wild game is being sold illegally on the Indian market. But the Jarawa have even worse things to tell us.
They're offering us tobacco, and they want to show us how to chew it. It's not good for us. They give us alcohol. We don't want that either. But they still try and make us drink it. We don't want any, it's bad. But they try and influence us. It's like that in your world.
The Jarawa have been given a tiny glimpse of our world, but the increasing number of tourists is starting to make them feel like exhibits in a zoo. An Indian policeman is filming for a tourist next to a road that crosses the Jarawa Reserve. None of the tourists on the Andaman Islands wants to talk about these photo safaris, except for one guide who wishes to remain anonymous.
70 to 80% of Indian tourists who arrive in Andamans, in their package, like it's always there, like, you know, just to have a look, like how these Jarawas are, like. And that became actually a commercial business for all these travel agents in Port Blair. Like, and people are taking nude photographs and they are selling their CDs, like, you know, naked ladies dancing. I feel like it's actually sort of an exploitation, like these innocent Aboriginal primitive tribes, like, you know.
At the beginning of the road are the same signs you will see in game reserves. Escorted by the Indian Army, dozens of vehicles cross the reserve 4 times a day. Inside are tourists who have paid to take pictures of the Jarawa. Tourist videos have been uploaded online. Nobody had ever asked the Jarawa what they thought, but we did. Takulu, one of the hunters, is the clan's spokesman. With tourism, money came into their lives.
Over there, they give us money to go shopping. We buy cakes for the kids. We buy food, sugar, for example. If we don't have money, it's not a problem. But in the shop, if we don't have money, we can't buy cakes. If you don't have money, you can't get anything. We don't like going on the road. It's very bad. We don't like going there.
With the Indian government focusing on developing the archipelago, the plight of the Jarawa seems to come a distant second to other concerns. Especially now the Andaman Islands have become the most popular destination for India's new middle class. The ruling nationalist BJP party is denying the Jarawa the right to self-determination, something the Jarawa say is unacceptable.
We don't like the outside world. We don't want to have any contact and be too close to your world. We want to stay the way we are. Your world is bad for us. We don't like it. There are too many people. There's too much noise and no peace. Your world smells bad. We're at home here. This is where we want to live. Here we can find everything we need. In the evenings we're together. We sit down. We build a bonfire. We're happy together. We have no worries.
Despite repeated requests, no Indian official was willing to be interviewed. Included in the vision of the Indian agency responsible for the Jarawa is to discharge its duties and responsibilities on behalf of India and the world to this unique heritage by conserving the ecology and environment to enable the indigenous people to live as per their own genius. But the temptation to force the Jarawa from their unspoilt beaches to build hotels might prove too strong, whatever the declarations of goodwill the Indian authorities may have made. And with no clear policy or seeming will to protect them, how soon will it be before the world's oldest peoples simply disappear forever?
Our reporter Alexander Rance joins us here. Alexander, thank you so much for that report. Clearly, you were going to places where people hadn't been before, and certainly no white people. You could tell by the reaction that people gave. How difficult was it to make this film?
The area is a restricted area, so you cannot go there. The Indian Army is patrolling all the time, by boat, by plane. So this forest should be completely secured, but it's not, in fact. So we made our way inside this territory. We investigate for 4 years, and we've been there 4 times. Very small amount of day each time. And since then, the situation has worsened a lot. In 2014, the Jarawa women have been abducted and raped by Indian men. And poachers go there, they give them alcohol, tobacco, and they hand the game, as you said. And now the situation is getting worse and worse because the Jarawa are only 400 people left.
You can see a comparison with American Indians, what happened to them, Native Americans, when the Europeans landed in the 15th century. But this people is far more ancient. It's been there for many, many, many more years than the Indians in what is now the USA. Yeah,
the last studies revealed that the Jarawa came from Africa 70,000 years ago. And the story is repeating itself. In fact, we can see that what happened in America is going to happen now in the Andaman Island.
And Alexandre, an ancient people, and they are protected, but somehow they're not being protected. Why is that happening?
In fact, this territory is a blackout. There is no media allowed there, no anthropologist. Nobody can go there to study the Jarawa or to report what's going on. So this is why we get in to give the Jarawa a voice. And the Indian government stated recently that the Jarawa want to join the mainstream. They want to become Indian. But in fact, nobody ever asked them if they want to do that. So this is what we did. And I think the answer is pretty clear. They said, we want to stay as we are.
Tell us the impression that you got of how the Jarawa's life is, what their lifestyle is, how they live.
It's a life of happiness and joy and freedom. It's just amazing to see that. And also, this is very sad to understand that it could be stopped very fast. So yes, it's a quite very impressive experience.
And a feeling that the Indian government is more concerned with developing tourism in this area than actually preserving this rare people.
Yeah, a few months ago, the Indian government stated that they want to make Port Blair, which is the local capital of the Andaman, the biggest port on the Indian Ocean. So this is not only tourism, it's also economical development and army development. And you know, there is very few places like Andaman Island in India. It's compared like the Maldives or Seychelles. So there is a huge economical and touristic potential there, and they want to exploit it at the maximum.
And of course, for the Jarawa, that looks, well, very bleak in the future.
Yes.
Alexandre, thank you very much for your film, exposing a part of the world that, well, nobody ever sees, but you got there for us, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Alexandre de Reims with that report, which of course you can see again via our website, france24.com. This is Reporters on France 24. Stay with us.
Sir, there is one other popular video, an ethnography of an ethnograph of the Jarawas, which I will share with you. Which some voice problems are there in that video. You can do it personally at home. Before we actually wind up the course, I wanted you to have an idea about what has been going on there. True that in the newspapers on more or less a regular basis you keep on seeing something or the other. But then as many of the students keep telling me that once we physically have a look at the ethnograph, it has a lot of impact on the mind and the thinking process and an understanding. Sir, as you could see in that interview, they are also, of course, relating it to what must have happened in the Red Indian populations to the Red Indian populations. It doesn't seem to be so very different from what must have happened to them. At least I think because the time at which we are living, at least we have an understanding that, okay, some people and some cultures might disappear unless you take some bit of care about them. Maybe when the Europeans were populating the northern part of America, they were with all their power, with all their secrecy that was there, they were able to eliminate the whole population. Maybe in that sense, now there are a bit of checks and balances against whatever is going on in the government. But sir, true that at one point of time, it hurts that that is the way exploitation has been going on. When it comes to these islanders especially, their exploitation seems to be much more direct and physical when compared to maybe somebody in the mainland, somebody in the northeastern region, etc. See, in the other cases, for example, we are talking about the mainland when populations are increasing and then resources are required and hence you are coming into contact. This kind of a basis is there to justify why we are actually entering the tribal world. But when it comes to this particular region, maybe that justification is not there. Maybe somewhere a choice of the entire community, the entire citizenry to maybe subjugate somebody for one's own pleasures and fancies. So there is no, it shows very clearly. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. But of course, there's a justification on one particular thing. No, in your general studies, you must have come across this, no, because these islands are very close to certain other very disturbing regions of Asia, Southern Asia. That is some of the Indonesian islands. You know, there are some security concerns. Their government has to guard its territories, and hence, you know, far down there, it has to establish some kind of, you know, a tri-command. This becomes inevitable. And those of you who must have visited Andaman, you must have seen there that except for 2 or 3 islands, you're not actually allowed into the rest of the islands. Permits are also very difficult to get. But it is said that even those islands are being exploited illegally. The ones that are there open on the islands, whatever populations are existing, primitive tribes are existing, the picturization of them or then videography of them, making it very commercial kind of a thing. This is somewhere, it doesn't serve our direct economic needs, if at all you want to talk about resources. So I think it is here, there is everything said and done, there is a faulty decision, not simply of the government, of the people also. We cannot blame government for everything. Many times it may be the people who want to go there and do kind of things. So this is one of the examples which you can actually make a mention in your answer, that culture contact can be of different kinds. This can be seen as an exploitation by the individuals and general population. So every exploitation need not be coming from the government or the administration. People are also responsible. So maybe there has to be some kind of a pressure group, some kind of voice one has to give, saying that this is one of the views. If we are airing to the government officials, they wouldn't anyway accept. Who will accept if something goes wrong? Nobody would accept that yes, this is our fault. So this is that region where a lot of NGO activity is actually necessary. One glaring thing here is there is an absence of voluntary or non-governmental organizations. In the mainland, we see that some kind of organization or there, some voice is there. If not anybody else, missionaries are there. Maybe this is the region where missionaries did not enter, and maybe because of that, the kind of exposure did not come to them. If at all, long time back, at the time when they were starting to come to Bengal in the 1700s, instead of choosing Bengal, if they had chosen Andaman, maybe Andaman would have been much more prosperous than India itself. Maybe it could have declared independence for itself, because territorial distance is there, geographical distance is there, kind of. Maybe that could have been much more willing social change that they must have instigated in the population. I'm using very rightful words there. Now you want to, but then you are not taking the consent of them. That is the whole thing. That's where I wanted to introduce to you one small concept. Choosing sites for tourism has to be done taking into account several things, including how our behavior has to be as a tourist. This is one of the topics that is actually not directly asked in your exam, in your syllabus. Problems of culture contact. Whole lot of people, starting from R.C. Verma to Vidyardhi to Zaza, the general consensus we find in them is that any kind of culture contact or culture contact in general is responsible for all the problems of tribals. So I was trying to bring 3 or 4 major things that have to be incorporated in such a question. So, अच्छा ये था I had to give a clarification in the class. As such, anyway, 14th you are going to have a test. 14th or 15th, I'll declare that, announce that particular date. Um, but see, most of the questions that we are giving in your exam are the ones that you already had a talk in the class, many times structuring of the answer, etc. So they were telling me that students are expecting explanation kind of a thing of the test. So maybe that you are making me do the course again by asking for an explanation of, if you are not my student, some outsider is writing the test, if he is asking for an explanation of that kind. So that is justifiable. But then my request is, suppose any particular question you are not able to approach properly, you can message me, mail me, whatever, so that I will do the. I'm not saying that I won't touch the question paper at all. Aisa hai nahi. If any difficult questions are there for which answers are difficult to find in whatever discussions we had, you are free to ask. So I was trying to pick up certain things which shall be mentioned in culture contact. Generally, we start with the religious contact. Any place for that matter, before anybody could reach, God will reach there. So religion could be the first thing which must have. And interestingly, I wanted to have a Hindu contact as the first point to be written there, if at all one is looking at the historicity. So historically speaking, those are the list of tribes. I tried to pick up rather bigger ones where different levels of Hinduization is found. So contact can be at the level of belief in supernatural. I did not elaborate on certain things there. Such as examples for Christianization, examples of Islamization, etc. I'm only trying to give you a structure information we have discussed at different places in your class. Though I have said this many times earlier, I want to repeat it here, that see to it that, see, whenever you are picking up a question to answer, try to think of any school of thought or any thinker from general global anthropology that can be mentioned in your answers. That would give you a lot of credibility in your answer writing. Maybe now you can experiment in the examination, the true examination. You may not be able to experiment. Make it a habit now, so that if you're in the thinking process, you would get used to identify such kind of linkages. So when it comes to the economic aspects, it may be loss of economic subsistence. For example, when the Jarawa you were looking at, they are speaking of the wild boar population, which was the main food stake of Jarawas. People, outsiders, are trying to hunt, etc. And in return, they are giving clothing, which was actually not really necessary for them. And they were taking the wild boar, giving a bit of breads and cakes, whatever. So see, artificial sugar you are introducing to them, and then the natural food, natural protein you are depriving of them. So economic subsistence could be the other one. And why I liked that discussion is there is something about introduction of money. Even before anything was introduced for them, money was introduced. When you start getting money, you would want to see how to spend it. You got used to spending, so you actually are demanding money. So that is the kind of cycle that you are driving them into. And in order to get to that money, they start doing all kinds of things. So depriving of hunting areas, introduction of the modern money, exploitation of different kinds, and then certain things that I have written, some that I really love, so I wanted to list them out there. Political aspects. Of course, political anthropology, evolution of it is one of the topics that I still have to come back to you. On Monday, I will be doing that. When mainstream punishment methods are introduced, it shows that you are trying to override the centuries-old ways of handling their disputes. See, it's like intruding into your very personal affairs. When the societies have evolved to certain levels, you start to judge people, saying that how can you hunt somebody's head? It is very violent and very inhuman. But I don't know, we will have to also look at the level of inhuman attitude that we are showing towards them when we are doing certain things. So those are some of the things that are actually considered to be not right according to the modern mainstream law, whether it is headhunting, marriage by capture, or marriage by elopement, etc. We have introduced a jail in them. We do not want a blood for blood. For whatever bloody thing you do, we are making them sit behind the bars, feed them properly, give them good health, so that once again when they come back, they are totally fit to do the things in a much more efficient way. They can plan like Neanderthal was planning down in the caves and trying to draw things and plan his hunting expeditions. These people can also plan, get into the new contacts there, strengthening of all criminality there, kind of things. And you have the other ones, penal fees. These are all the things that do not exist anymore, wherever we are extending the modern legal. So those are some of the examples that I have written. Maybe a word about them you can incorporate, or that is actually to give a new thought, like UCC. If at all the examiner wants to go highly offbit from your syllabus, he might incorporate such kind of things as 10 markers or so. UCC provide an anthropological perspective. So you should be in a position to add. See, in your regular reading, you might be trying to compare different religions and why you need something like a uniform civil code. When more than one diverse cultural groups, religious groups are living together, there is always a possibility that one is getting bombarded into the other. And when that is happening, when the relationships are getting established, the civil procedures have to be worked out. If at all it is for the registration of marriages or the kind of divorces, inheritances, status of children, etc., etc., all these have to be properly. That's the reason why we said earlier also, marriage is not between two individuals, it may be between two communities, and everything else is decided based on what you're actually doing. This is generally the discussion, multiculturalism, etc. Your duty will be to incorporate, if at all UCC can be extended to the tribal areas as well, tribal populations as well. See, it's a different story that working out a conclusion on the general population diversity within the general population itself is taking time. So if at all you want to bring in the tribal populations also, so very diverse of them, and what is the kind of system that you would want to impose on them? Maybe the mainstream Hindu system you would want to impose. If at all they have already converted into one particular religion, that might come into conflict. Or if are they really ready to take up the mainstream mainstream laws, personal laws? For example, I have written somewhere their excommunication or protection of the totemic animals or killing of some of the totemic animals, when they are not really happy with the way your wildlife laws are functioning, will they be happy to receive? So this could be one you can think about on UCC. UCC, an anthropological perspective. So this could be the three of the major components: religious impact, economic impact, and political impact. I'll tell you something. You can perhaps also incorporate certain other things like locality rules, status of women, divorce laws. We have seen how simple divorce can be in some of the tribal communities. Just for the fun sake, no. Just for the fun sake, actually, I would want to see how the things would work in a tribal world, especially in the context of divorce. The examples that I have written there are the ones who are exposed to such kind of changes, marriage payments, and the tribes like Meena. There's a complete reversal. There's a complete change towards the mainstream. Bride prices are substituted by dowry. So somewhere mainstream has already decided that, see, this is what is a desirable thing, and we are trying to offer the same thing to the rest of the world. It's as simple as the classical evolutionist looking at his own society, offering to the rest of the world, saying that, see, this is what is the route that you'll have to follow. The ones that have disappeared from the cultural map: youth dormitories, several kinship associations. Some bit of writing will be there on certain topics today. Then we will give more examples related to kinship associations. There are the other culture contact issues, cutting short the big list. There can be cultural contact, or meaning social contact. There can be economic contact, political contact, religious contact. And all those things might result in displacement of the people with the mega ventures. Everybody would want to do the needful in tribal exploitation and culture contact. So the other individuals and things come, like contractors, policies. This is a basic structure I am giving so that an answer can be generated on culture contact impact on tribals. Many times they might be succumbing to the load that is coming from outside, because as the interview itself was mentioning, nobody had asked them, nobody would ask them. How many times you were asked in your life what exactly you want? I don't know. So the freedom to choose is the last thing that they can actually expect. But then there are certain islands of knowledge, islands of awareness and wisdom, where some people have emerged and they started questioning the identity, and they started raising some kind of movements, tribal movements also. Your syllabus talks about quest for tribal identity. Somewhere in your syllabus, in the 7th chapter or so, you find this word, quest for tribal identity. In a fight to get establish one's identity, some of them have come up with several revolutions, movements, etc. That will be our subject matter at a later topic. There's something called social change among tribals. There we are going to talk about various movements, tribal movements. Remember, sir, for questions such as these tribal movements, There is one thinker by name K.S. Singh. He is a very contemporary historical writer in anthropology. He is the one who tried to categorize when it comes to establishment, running of NGOs, or topics such as tracing the evolution of tribal movements and assertion of the tribal rights in India. He was trying to give a categorization, chronology. He was a first generation student of LP Vidyarthi, so the same kind of tendency we find in him. So in each of the time periods, before independence he has certain phases, after independence he has certain phases. He identifies what are the reasons for movements at particular points of time, and he explains with certain examples, which forms a very beautiful answer which you can either use in the optional or in the general studies. So this is one question, sir. Make yourself ready with that question. Problems of culture contact. I'm interested in something else. There is one topic in your syllabus called impact of industrialization and urbanization as a part of chapter 7. First, we will do something here. We'll try to get an overall picture of that answer, and we will see how studies on industrialization have picked up in the discipline. The question that we are looking at is impact of industrialization and urbanization on tribes. The general terms that we keep on using in the whole lot of explanation is industrialization in the tribal areas and mining activities, open mines. On the other hand, you have urbanization where a lot of culture contact climatic damages, environmental damages, people try being pushed into urban centers, unemployment, and then expanding infrastructure, individual exploitation, and several other things apart from industrial nomadism. Your answer should revolve around these are the things that should definitely come in your answer. I would want to introduce a couple of names here, then we will start discussing what we have written there. My beautiful handwriting, I'll explain what I have written there. Expanding infrastructure, individual exploitation, urbanization, sewages, culture contact, loss of ecology and environment, displacement, unemployment, open cast mines, industrial nomadism, mining, industrialization, this whole thing, and then environmental degradation. Can I talk? Start talking. Maybe I will first start with how things have begun in anthropological studies, then we'll pick up each of them from there. Did you finish drawing, painting? See, because let's see, after having discussed the core of the discipline, now we are at a stage to talk about whether what we have done was right or not, how we have done in the discipline, etc. We meaning not you and me, but the academicians in general. See, whenever a question is asked, a topic is mentioned in your syllabus, a thought that should come to your mind is why a particular topic was asked, or why a particular topic was taken up by anthropologists to study in the discipline. So when it comes to industrialization, this on the face of it doesn't look to be the core of anthropology. Because if one observes the content that the discipline aims at is to study maybe the simple fellows, the tribal fellows, and that kind of a mindset was there across the world for a long time. The discipline was not getting into industrialization. Interestingly, the first studies about industrialization impact on the natives and tribals, this had started from Africa, where the first European arrivals have happened. That looks to be very interesting. At that point of time when the discipline was not formally established, so one school of fellows who were originally, somebody like sociologists or culturologists as people were called, they started this kind of a study of how global trade and industrialization is having an impact on the people who were never exposed to the external world. And those things have started from the Western African region along those Gold Coast, etc. That can be seen as the beginning. And the second major event had happened in the 1870s. That was in Guatemala in Southern America. They had established, Guatemala had some kind of industrial establishments, especially dealing with the textiles. When the first textile mills were established there, that was the first opportunity for the natives to get a different kind of an employment. I am talking about a formal study by some kind of an academician, if at all industrialization was taken into consideration. So there was this man by name Nash. he was the first one who started studying the tribes of Guatemala and how textile industries have introduced all those kinds of things, plethora of problems, when you are giving a job. See, as long as you don't have a job, you don't have a problem. The moment you have a job, you have a problem. You have money, you will have to spend it. Just because you have money, you should have a wife. And then just because she has, you have to have something else. So it's like, kickstarting the economy actually. Give money to somebody. You are kickstarting the economy. You are trying to bring newer desires and needs and wants in the people. People start asking more and more. So in order to produce what we are asking, you'll have to establish industries. So that's how the whole chain actually. So it's like when you are born, you will have to live your life. You cannot sit quietly and live your life. You should keep on doing something. So in order to keep on moving and doing something, some kind of activities, economic activities you are getting busy into. And you forget the life at the end of the day. So one of my friends the other day was saying, we are all into a rat race. Unfortunate thing is at the end of the race also we still are rats. Whoever is winning, one of the rats is winning. The other rats are once again trying to run. So this is the kind of a setup we are trying to introduce to them. So textile industries when Guatemala had for the first time. These are the very beautiful tribes that we had been speaking of, like Ojibwa Indians or Crow Red Indians. They were the ones that were getting influence, that were getting into the fold of textile industries. And when it comes to India, the study of industrialization was much later, after 1950s only, industrialization impact. But I do want to mention there about writings of D.N. Majumdar, A Tribe in Transition. That was the book that he had written, Tribe in Transition. He was trying to explain how the Khasas were experiencing a change, tribe in transition, the change of Khasa tribe, and elsewhere in the ethnograph of the Ho. You remember we wrote it as a problem-oriented ethnograph. The meaning of problem-oriented ethnograph is Ho were experiencing certain cultural problems, certain newer economic problems, and that's where D.N. Majumdar was trying to analyze what could be the solution for this kind of a problem that they are experiencing. So in the name itself, you can understand a tribe in transition or a problem-oriented ethnograph. He is trying to point out certain problems that are emerging due to culture contact and possible solutions he was trying to offer. Apart from him, there was somebody called Nash in 1958, an anthropologist by name Nash in 1958. He was the one who gave the particular scheme of approaching industrialization impact on tribals in India. See, at the end of the day, this is where the answer actually differs. See, the same kind of a question we see in general studies also, like industrialization and impact on tribals. You would be very happy writing 10 points with a side head and underline and whatever, and then you would feel more than elated. But the problem is the examiner should get delighted. Same answer you write here, he would not even look at you. So what happened was that Nash was trying to give a scheme of things such as, see, those are the 4 different categories that one has to study. In terms of emergence of industries, for him it was plantation industry that was first to come, followed by mining, followed by manufacturing. And then he was trying to see how tribal labor is being exploited for various other subsequent things. If you recall the forest policies, at one of the places we said that conversion of land is sparingly allowed. Before it was totally banned, there was a partial allowing of the conversion. One of the things that was allowed for conversion was plantation agriculture. I think that one point somewhere I have missed in dictation. This you can incorporate there. In that 1927 Act, a partial allowance was given, a partial allowance of land conversion was allowed, and that was only for plantation agriculture. When you have taken this particular decision of allowing forest land for plantation agriculture, we already have understood for whom you have done that. It may not be for that small tribal fellow who is having some bit of land. He is not going to raise rubber plantations or tea coffee plantations and export it. So certain regions of Assam, they were the first ones to begin with. Assam was the first one to get the tea plantations, and then after that certain other places in Bengal, and then down south certain places. But the beginning had happened in Assam. Now here what has to be understood is, Nash was trying to present one very interesting element there. They are labor intensive intensive agricultural works, the plantation farms, for which a constant flow, high amount of human resource was necessary. Interestingly, the neighboring people within Assam, within Bengal, the tribes that have small land holdings, or certain caste groups that were having rural communities that were having land holdings, they were not ready to work as the laborers there. They preferred to be by themselves. So the white fellow had nothing, no option left. He had to get labor from somewhere else. So at one point of time, Nash identifies that most of the labor force was coming from different parts of northern India, and subsequently from southern India as well. So tribes from central provinces, tribes from UP or Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, these were the regions from where, and Rajmahal Hills, these are the basic sources of the labor. Meaning that you have tried to offer to them something on monetary lines. It is here that, see, in the evolution of culture, many times we got this idea that, say, somebody has moved from A to B to C to D. There might be a possibility that somebody might move from A to D directly by leaving certain stages in between. So these people are an example for that. Maybe a very primitive occupation was there, maybe shifting cultivation may be there, or maybe some kind of a foraging activity, and suddenly you are bringing that tribal population into this kind of intensive agricultural work, partially industrial work. So it shows that in their evolution they have left behind certain stages. Are you with me, sir? Are you comfortable? See, I cannot actually ask a question of comfort when I'm dealing with a problem, but still, as the routine goes, I should say whether you are comfortable. थोड़ा सा और bear कर लेना. I mean, hardly any days there. So I have been more than thankful to bearing with me for such a long time. But वही है, वही पुरानी कहानी है, जैसा कि हाथी निकल गया, पूंछ रह गया. We are trying to pull the पूंछ out of it. So let us do it without getting tired. I want to send you in one piece back home. I said, like, you're going back and saying that now no more UPSC, let me go to the jungle and do kind of a thing. Your people would get bewildered. So it all started with the tea plantations and then several other kinds of things. And we can see that this kind of indentured labor later started to coming up from the lower castes. So it all had begun with the tribal populations, but later the lower castes in a big way, especially when it comes to southern India. And these were the people who could decide about, who could take a decision about crossing the seas and oceans and go a long way from their places, because for a Brahmin, for an upper caste, crossing the waters was prohibited. That is a taboo. You would be an outcast, you would lose your religion if you are crossing the waters, sea waters. That was taken as an advantage by the lower castes. So they could swim across Arabian Sea and then go to Saudi Arabia or Africa or different parts of Africa. Now if you go and observe there, especially in different parts of Africa, Kenya, Southern Africa, Botswana, etc., we see that Indians are the sought after people there. We are the big time fellows there. We are the moneyed people there. And we are making the black fellows work in our farms. So we look to be much fairer there, not simply in complexion, but also in what we are doing. When somebody else had done that to us, we were not really happy. But when we are doing, there's nothing there. One of my little friends, after he had done his microbiology something, masters, he loved to work in beverages, but they are teetotalers. He loves to work in the beverages. So he found a job there for Kenya. So he was more than joyous to go. Now he reports from there that we are big people here. In spite of he joining very new, without any kind of an experience, straight from the college, he's heading a unit there because rest of the fellows are black. The only grouse this little fellow is having is that I wish I could have been a little brown. I am competing with them in skin color. At the end of the day, see how the stereotypes are coming up. Now, after this particular thing, I'll have to say this. Initially, industrialization was not taken seriously in anthropological studies, but later they found that industrialization was attacking the core of the tribal life. They found it necessary. There were two varieties of writings. One variety was that they focused on initially the economic impact of industrialization, because that looks to be very obvious. Later they found there are several other things that are also getting affected because of industrialization. It is not everything economics, there are the other elements also, and hence a cultural non-economic impact also became an area of study. That's where D.N. Majumdar's writings become very important. His writings were not simply on economics. He was writing about how the consumption patterns were changing, how the institutions, family institutions were changing, how the markets were changing. And outlook towards the life itself is getting altered. Then industrialization becomes a subject matter. Urbanization was examined, considered as an area of study with the help of American anthropologists alone. When we looked at all those lot of people like Robert Redfield or McKim Marriott and all their cousins and brothers and everybody coming and trying to experiment with us on expansion of urban rural kind of a thing. Then after 1960s, Indian anthropologists also started focusing it. Now going back to Nash, he was then considering mining, quarrying. So this is the chronological arrangement he is trying to make. First was the plantation. Second, to see the impact on tribals was mining activities and quarrying. Somehow, fortunately or unfortunately, the places on which they are standing, they are full of resources that the mainstream community requires. Either you empty the place or we will put you in the dig. Maybe we would try to eliminate, we would try to dig out, explore the mine from there, and we'll fill the mine with your bodies. And hence they anyway have to leave the places. Interestingly, they themselves were forced or allowed or offered to dig the mine for the mainstream society. So here also we see that a sudden transfer, sudden evolution is happening, or we're skipping the stages there. From a very primitive economic occupation, you are getting into industrial labor. We have seen industrial labor as a mainstay when agriculture was losing its significance or it was changing in the mainstream society. We use words like depeasantization, where agricultural communities are giving up agriculture and trying to find a job in industrial setup. శ్రీమంతుడు సినిమాలో శ్రీమంతుడు, that's the name of the movie. శ్రీమంతుడు is moneyed person. So a family wants to move out from the village so that they can stay in the urban area. So our hero explains to the family, you won't find much there. It's only that from the window you can see more buildings. It's only that you feel that you are living in an urban area, otherwise there is nothing there. These things look interesting to hear. We cannot encourage people to stay in rural areas anymore, because those are the places where at some point of time we could see milk and honey flowing. There is no milk anymore there. The milk from there is getting bottled or packaged to the urban centers. And your own cow, your own buffalo, you cannot use the milk of your own buffalo and cow, because the sahukar is there to whom you will have to sell, or the milk van comes every day to pick up. If, for instance, there's a less supply of milk that day from your buffalo, you are adding some water and trying to provide. Selling it under the title skimmed milk. So many varieties have come in the milk these days. Double tone. By drinking them, your tone is actually lost, body tone. Other fellows are there. Once you decided at one point of time, we decided that we have to increase our GDP. Numbers became important. He told us that big is beautiful. We grew up before 47 listening to that old man that small is beautiful. Suddenly an opposite picture, opposite lesson was taught, and everybody started to love things that are big. So there was a number game. Yesterday there was a full-fledged discussion on falling GDP rate by about 2%. And hence some schemes are actually, so okay, if something negative is happening at one page in the newspaper, you should see that government is coming up with some kind of insurance kind of things. Loss of trust in the public, that's a very costly thing. Maine kuch nahi kaha. I have my vote reserved for people. I generally vote for independent candidates, whoever it is. Whoever, irrespective of who it is, an independent candidate. The name looks very interesting, independent. He looks to be independent. Whether he can do something or not. I think the things are getting worrisome. Now, when numbers became important, manufacturing industries, it's not simply the tribal manufacturer, small scale manufacturer was also suffering. So, like herds, people were driven into the machines. अच्छा वो मूवी का नाम मुझे याद नहीं है उसका that Mookie movies used to be there. City, something like Charlie Chaplin wala. Industrialization and how the things happen. He gets stuck in the machine, then tries to get out of it. So the vagaries of industrialization actually, the very apt way of picturizing. Just imagine a tribal is going there, trying to work say in a car industry, in the assembly line. Instead of he trying to fit the nuts and bolts, he's getting into the fitting machine. So the whole lot of population that was not having a basic education was getting into industrialization. You are actually opening doors for the new prospective diseases there. And that's how things have been. And then came tribal labor that was becoming wiser. At some pockets in the country, particular parties, labor parties coming up, trying to give them knowledge, wisdom about how the exploitation has been happening. This is where you can talk about the reddening of the industries. And where the reddening was happening, rights movement started to emerge. This is how things are. This is the idea of Nash. Now let me go back to
Manufacturing industries, those might be micro and small, or cottage industries, can be anything.
the focus is on big. Small can eliminate small numbers, and encouragement of small was very late to come. Before the small by the time small decided that okay, I can escape, maybe I can commit a suicide. At such a time only you got an encouragement by about 1970s or so, when the party changed and they said that okay, small fellows should also be taken into account, kind of. By that time the patient died. Nothing was left out.
Always being an anthropologist, we need to write total tribal. But in few cases, few tribal communities are more developed, almost equal to upper caste. In few constituencies, they are dominant and they are making kabjas and illegal activities and all those things. And they are more industrialized and all these things. And claiming and filing fake atrocity cases against other castes. Can we write the same thing in the answer?
You can say that there are elitistic tendencies, shrewd people coming up, taking advantage of the legislations that are provided, without saying that they are doing kabzas and kind of things. You can say that they are cornering the benefits of the larger community and becoming much more elitistic. See, in every community you have this. When more than 100% are there at a downtrodden state, and one small tip of an iceberg is emerging to do kind of things. ठीक है, I mean, if you want to say, you can say it that there are elite. You can say that there are elite. Yes.
Few communities utilizing the labor globalization, privatization, 1991 of the period of they got evolved.
Actually, I was telling one of my tribal friends, a medical doctor, I was telling him that there's some kind of organizations are there who are trying to sponsor people and all. So I was telling him that if at all in his relatives, kinsmen in his village, If somebody is there, he can guide them to us and we will help out, direct them, kind of. The answer given by him made me think for a while. He says that not really, I don't advise really. The moment he said that, I was thinking, because I knew how this particular person grew in life. We will go back to that at a later point of time. But then when he said that, I thought maybe he's more than selfish. But he was explaining things will not be useful because I know the kind of crowd that we are talking about. That would come only for a merrymaking. I don't see any serious candidates who could take a benefit of what you are actually thinking of. May not be in my own hamlet. I may look outside the hamlet and then try to. So what he says is, when you are trying to sponsor the candidate, give him money, he would be busy spending the money rather than trying to prepare for. I actually didn't know how to respond. Maybe somewhere down the line, awareness levels are extremely low, I think. It may not be the case in all the tribal belts, but he was very particular about it. No, don't try to waste your resources, and kind of we will see outside our hamlet where people might be really serious of taking up the careers, kind of. I know. So the will to progress also is very much important. That's where the awareness levels have to be built. What you are speaking of definitely happens.
Can we write
You can, Raj, Navudu Raj, problem in there. Navudu is Hasteve.
In Nash, the chronology, last one is tribal labors. But before that, we might have used tribal labors from beginning. So how that particular will be?
I have written that word in order to say that, so in order to communicate that awareness levels or the awareness of rights of the laborers have started to come. It's not that tribal labor had emerged there. Right from the beginning, the talk is that itself. So legislations or movements for the protection are asking for the rights of the tribal laborers, etc. That had begun at that point of time. Rights issues, as you rightly said. A few things that I have written there. So in the writings of industrialization especially, you'll have to mention LP Vidyarthi, because he had extensively toured and written about especially the Chota Nagpur region, where he had first-hand experience of seeing not simply displacement but also cultural inferiority emerging due to industrial nomadism. Money brings several worries, vagaries. The same old saying, "Ma డబ్బున్నోళ్ళ కష్టాలు తెలియవు మీకు" అన్నట్టుగా. Moneyed people have different lots of problems. I think the Prime Minister's move of making everything digital, electronic, that solved a lot of problems for several people. You need not every time carry the cash in your pocket. Though initial hiccups will be there for any mental peace for several people. Now, there are a few things here. I especially would want to talk about the positive and negatives in the political, and then the kind of traditions that are leading to the revolts. We are going back to the fourth phase there. The fourth top point that Nash was talking about, awareness of political rights. This could happen in the communities who got into industrial circles. Compare them with somebody like a Jarawa that we have seen today. He has no knowledge, he has no awareness of the rights. Now he is starting to talk about, because somebody else is coming and telling him that you can talk about the rights. Compare him with somebody in Raj Mahal Hills. The tribes that grew intelligent, that grew very wise because of exploitation. So it's as simple as the more rigorously you are churned, the better is the product that comes out. Without being subjected to such kind of pain and atrocities, they would not have come to realize, they would not have come to a point where they would either revolt or talk about the rights. Generally, when we see somebody at the top of some scale, we only look at him, but the steps that he must have taken, the pain that he must have taken to reach there, that goes unnoticed. So when somebody is launching a movement, she was heading that movement, a whole lot of population was coming together and then saying that, see, we don't want these projects, and trying to damage whatever the governmental intentions there was. From a distance, it looks to be an anti-governmental, anti-national, anti-establishment, all anti-negative terms that we try to attach to them. But what must have gone to their lives that they alone can understand. So I think Jarawas have to go a long way before they start talking about any rights. But my fear is before they know the rights, they already would have vanished, like many other populations. So there's a positive side, there is a negative side. When you are opening not simply the cultural doors, you are opening the political doors, the mainstream population has started to rule you, irrespective of whether you want to be ruled or not. This is a very, very pathetic situation actually. If we look back and see, now at many places time has passed and then we really can't go back and correct the things. Though we say that we have come up with district councils, hill area councils, where we promised that whatever you decide we would provide self-governing, self-administration, etc. Maybe at that point of time they did not understand what you are speaking, they didn't know what to govern from a new perspective, and you did not have an awareness. You tried to do the same kind of mastery over the region, and somewhere down the line that kind of bitterness had deposited in the minds, and now going back, and many times it becomes very, very, very impractical and impossible. Certain mistakes maybe perhaps be corrected, but many mistakes you will not be able to. So maybe we are at a time where we can talk about compensations, or maybe we are at a time where we have to talk about resettlements and some kind of delegation of powers. So at that point of time, how much ever you do, the other fellow is not really happy. Maybe you can apply to your own life this particular thing. When in the flow of the things, you do things, you take decisions in such a way that you are actually not looking at the other fellow. Sometimes in the fit of that emotion, the way you react to things, next time when that happens, you look at the person. I'm sure you would go back to beg for a sorry. Many times this happens. It is not happening at an individual level, at a cultural level it is happening. At a cultural level, you are actually not respecting what they actually might be needing. See, sometimes we cannot blame the situation also. Blame the individuals also. Things happen at such a pace that you don't have a control. But anyway, that had to happen. This is a Kali Yuga. It had to happen. See, such a beautiful excuse we have got. So remember, now, especially when it comes to Indian anthropology, Indian tribal governance, we are at a stage where The time has crossed of talking about expansion of mainstream economy, expansion of mainstream polity. That has already happened. Whether they liked it, whether they wanted it, they did not want it. And unpardonable mistakes have already happened. The time is that you will have to try to undo the damage to the extent possible. Maybe give them education, convince them that education is necessary. Otherwise, we will exploit you much more. Your life will be much more horrible than what it is right now. Because previously you didn't know that you had to have the kind of education that mainstream had. That it is here actually I should really thank the kind of missionary schools that were established in especially in the northeastern regions. Beautiful schools where the mainstream actually cannot think of the kind of education that they are getting. So the duty of the administrator now is to convince the people that they should be able to get this education so that they are not exploited. You're not ensuring welfare for them. You are trying to say that, see, this is necessary, otherwise your life will be much more worse. Second could be that whatever education that you are giving, that has to be functional. I don't know how you make it functional. Because we know very well the kind of education through which we came. Many times that is a non-functional, dysfunctional education. Whatever knowledge you have, whatever curiosity you have, that curiosity will be properly killed. You are only taught that this is the only best way of doing things. Like how I tell in the class, this is the answer that you will have to write. The best way of doing things. So systematically we are killing the rationality, the questioning ability. So how, to what extent, maybe functionality, what we might mean is maybe a job guarantee kind of an education. Maybe that comes at a later point of time. Or maybe the education system has to be geared up to improve the skills, develop the skills. That's where I always praise the Telangana social welfare schools. The way they are being groomed, the children are being groomed. The upper castes and the high income groups are actually getting envious of the whole system. Just imagine 1 lakh of Dalits are being strengthened at one point of time down the line, maybe about a decade later, 5 years later, you see them flooding the market. That would be much, much higher, a heart sore for the deprived upper classes. Just imagine. The upper class is feeling deprived. Already it is feeling deprived. The reservations, that the schemes, wo scheme hai, tumko ye scheme hai. And hence the Telangana government says that no worry, I am opening schools, I am giving schemes for the Brahmins also. Very systematically dismantling the Brahmanical supremacy theory. I really love this man for that. Very systematically dismantling the Brahmanical supremacy theory. But there are many more beautiful things that I would want to share about him. In that particular class, I will ask them to have no recording so that I can speak certain things from the deepest layers of my heart. And express my love towards that nosy man. Consumerism is something so positive and negative. There are several other positives. We have been talking about the positives in political system, like democratization. You know that you are important when the number. So the same arguments that we have for a dominant caste, they can be extended here. When number becomes important, every vote becomes important. One of the chief ministers, when he was saying that sometimes a vote has to be bought at 10,000, meaning I'll have to spend the 10,000. I understand his problem. But yes, an individual became important. On the other hand, to what extent it has been playing a negative role, your own political system has lost its significance. You cannot punish the people as you want. You cannot hunt the heads as you want. You cannot take the blood as you want. Or maybe your representation itself is not there. You cannot decide whether a road has to be laid to your village or not. Somebody else has to decide. I'm not simply talking about a tribal, a general population for that matter. First of all, you don't know what you want. Though you know what you want, you don't know how to ask. Even if you want to ask, you don't know whom to ask. You have asked him, you don't know whether he'll give you or not. So you are actually in so many shackles from all the sides. In your family, in your society. Maybe I'm trying to picture a very grim picture, give a very grim picture of the humanless society and life. And I think that's what it is. But then in the interview, when a question is asked, why IAS? One very beautiful answer which most of us come prepared with, because our training institute has told us to give this answer, that I want to be an agent of change. First of all, you should know what is change, how a change has to come. How can you be the agent of change? Don't trouble the trouble. If you trouble the trouble, trouble will trouble you. I actually give this sentence to my son, don't trouble the trouble. And he does it so nicely. He doesn't understand that he's the trouble. Life is like that. Don't know where our last laugh is. Shackles everywhere. On top of it, we have consumerism, maddening consumerism. We consume things not knowing why we consume them. It's as simple as neighbor has a bigger car, I should have much bigger car. He has a tall wife, I should have a taller wife. It's as simple as it is. People are getting busy with lengths and distances and sizes. Getting busy with them. I told you in one of our classes long time back, to see how things are happening back home when you are making the grocery purchases. I don't know whether you exercise this at home. When I say something, there's some kind of a serious work behind it. Everything is consumer run. We have seen in that marketplace, tribal marketplace in that picture, so much of plastic running around. Previously, jute bags used to be there. Gunny bags used to be there. I needed gunny bag for some purpose at home. I was not able to find a gunny bag. Then I had to ask somebody there, somebody who came from a rural area. They have packed certain things and got a gunny bag. Then I said that I'll give you a big shopper, give me that gunny bag. So barter was happening there. Kind of a thing, huh? I don't know whether it is a balance. But she wanted many, I wanted only one. Finally, I had to settle at a big cost. That's a different story. This you cannot have a compromise on, environmental, whatever. We will go back to note a few things there. Make a noting. I want to do two writings today. One is on industrialization, urbanization. Second will be on the topic of land alienation. So we'll start with, and sir, when land alienation is asked, a part of it will be industrialization, urbanization as well. So we feel that at many places we are repeating things. It's like that, no? Sometimes you have the same things round and round. You would be roaming around. So we'll start writing with industrialization, make a note. Impact of industrialization and urbanization on tribal population. I'm not repeating that introduction part, like, Nash study, the 4 parts there, that inevitably has to be given in your answer. That is evolution of study of industrialization in anthropology. You formally write down there so that you don't forget. Because don't know when will you open this book again. Evolution of industrialization studies in anthropology. Given by Nash. 1958. Come now. Industrial activity and urban projects. Industrial activity and urban projects. Are located in tribal areas. Are located in tribal areas. Not for their benefit, but for the greed of the non-tribals. Don't get me wrong, sir, for being so very negative. Keep writing. Not for their benefit, but for the greed of non-tribals and their lust for mineral resources. Their lust for mineral. Emma? Start. ఏదో చేయాలి ఇప్పుడు దానికి. Two problems here. One is you should not be branded as anti-governmental, anti-national. Because there is a fear that examiner may not give marks. Second is that when the discipline has to talk pro and anti of the establishment, that is what will give you marks. There is no other go. Maybe that's what I was telling in the previous classes also. The spirit has to be that I am there with you, the tribal fellow. You should communicate to him that I am there for you. In fact, you will have to understand that being an administrator, maybe your first job is to be with him, not to be with them. Over a period of time, it transpired that you are with them, you are not with these fellows. That's where the problem is coming. That's where you are in a dual mind, whether to, or maybe you are in a single mind, that I should not be writing for them, I should be writing for the government. What you can perhaps do is, you can reduce the acidity in the writing. Maybe you can, I told you earlier also, you may use some kind of a soft word, which I may not be able to use. You can use a bit of soft way of writing and say that maybe government has to be much more emotionally, whatever, physically, whatever, attached to the tribal kind of a thing. But then I will stick to what I am presenting for you. Don't worry unnecessarily. Marks to aayenge, aana hai to, they'll anyway come. If they have to come, they will come. Examiner understands that this subject needs it. Examiner understands. See, your problem is less severe. Compare it to, say, somebody like a literature optional fellow. Because in some of the literatures we are forced to say that no foreign language writing. But you know very well that other than your own literature paper, rest of the ones you are writing in English only. You will write there because you will have to write it there. So, don't trouble your mind and soul. Don't get into the dilemmas. And don't look worried. Feel happy that you are going to get marks. ठीक है sir. And I think this is the last time that we will be talking about this particular topic. I mean, whether we can abuse the government, whether we can write negative about the government. At least some disciplines have to do that work. If everybody is praising God, there should be the other side also. Kind of. You took away 5 minutes of my time. I was saying that this is also for the lust for mineral resources. Keep writing. According to Vidyarthi and Roy, the benefits from these projects were more oriented towards non-tribals. అలా చెప్తే బాగున్నట్టుంది. Were oriented more towards non-tribals. Doing a little good to the tribals. Occasionally, some of the tribal communities getting benefits from urbanization and industrialization emerged as elite, presenting islands of prosperity. But for an anthropologist, Marx, it is not that Marx. For an anthropologist, Marx, write in quotes, in the process, Marx, M-A-R-K-S kaadu, M-A-R-X. In the process of industrialization, the tribal loses his original world and cannot derive any benefit from the new world that only adds to his agony. Unquote. Vidyarthi lists the effects of industrialization and urbanization under number 1, displacement and rehabilitation. According to him, rehabilitation is as traumatic as displacement itself. With no time-bound rehabilitation policy. In Government of India. Write in the brackets. Such a policy emerged only in 2007. Such a policy emerged only in 2007. Close the bracket. Ad hoc measures, ad hoc measures such as monetary compensations, such as monetary compensations, right in the brackets, which largely failed, close the bracket. Distribution of degraded lands, distribution of degraded lands that cannot sustain the tribals, that cannot sustain the tribals have been initiated. Leave some space there to write examples of your liking related to the industries that must have led to massive displacements. When Vidyarthi was writing, he was pointing at a whole lot of steel plants, Bokaro and all those things. But later several other regions have emerged, Niamgiri and kind of things. Come to the second one. Industrial nomadism. Industrial nomadism. Introduced by L.P. Vidyarthi. The concept was introduced by L.P. Vidyarthi in his book Tribal Cultures in India, Tribal Cultures in India, where he defines it as the process referring to the large-scale influx, of migrating non-tribal workers into tribal areas, resulting in socio-economic and culture contact problems. This includes looking down upon tribal cultures, ill treatment of women, leading to psychological stress among tribals. Thirdly, economic impact. Introduction of modern money economy facilitated exploitation of tribal labor and their resources. Though initially promises were made to provide jobs in the industry, such jobs were largely confined to menial jobs. to menial jobs. Continue writing in the economics. Secondly, traditional production and consumption units such as community and family were replaced by individual based production and consumption. It introduced a me-centered economy based on consumerism. Continue writing in economy. The next line. Large scale industries eliminated small scale tribal industries such as the paper industry in Nasik and Kagaznagar affected the tribal economies depending on bamboo. Come to the fourth one. Cultural impact. Industrialization and urbanization promoted nuclear family, weakening the traditional kinship communities. Positively, they introduced rationality, helping tribals to come out of superstitions. According to Sachidananda, right in the brackets in his book, The Loss of Social Fabric, LOSS, The Loss of Social Fabric, bracket close. Tribals lost their social fabric due to the introduction of new social institutions and new varieties of occupations. Continues writing there. He is Sachidananda, studied the regions of Bhilai and Ranchi, where the tribals were forcing their women into prostitution with the expanding highways, into the tribal belt. He reported the loss of totemic sites, occasionally leading to tribal revolts that were branded as anti-social elements. Right, the next one, political impact. We still have to write in your next class about how different tribal communities have experienced, received when modern political system was introduced. So specific tribe level case studies we will be giving. But here I am only making a general remark in 2 or 3 sentences, make a note there. Introduction of modern political institutions reduced the importance of tribal councils. The mainstream political parties and labor unions increased political awareness of the tribals on the one hand, and dividing tribal villages on the party lines on the other hand. Right, the next point. Urbanism and consumerism. The self-sufficient and affluent economies of the tribal population were replaced by dependence and consumption of unessential modern goods such as cosmetics, polyester, cigarettes, and mainstream alcohol. Right, in the next paragraph. The loss of subsistence, lack of leisure, increasing speed of life, breakup of traditions, dismantling of kinships, left many tribal communities in a culture shock apart from reducing forest cover, increasing toxic wastes, reducing land fertility, contaminated waters, etc. Contaminated waters, etc. Sachidananda suggested that environmental impact assessment and cultural impact assessment with the inputs from the natives can help making an informed decision by the project affected people. He insisted on skill development and providing employment opportunities to minimize the damage. I really admire the coffee board for that. Some of you who must have lived in the regions where coffee boards are there, in the formative years especially, there was a high effort by the coffee board to train. Maybe it is for their own benefit, but then training the local populations in how to deal with picking up the coffee fruit and then dealing with it in the whole lot of the cycle there. This helped at a later point of time, even when the small time farmers are emerging. They wanted to do such kind of activities, and then the economics have started to change, especially where the coffee board was doing this. They were also going into this establishment of clinics for the health needs, and then small time schools there. Incredible amount of work, and I mean, you should be praising where we have to praise. So coffee board I have praised. That is a small note there. We had to do something else. सर एक छोटा सा टॉपिक है which I am going to place in your ड्रॉप बॉक्स. आप वो देखिएगा आज. A topic of this kind which I generally don't like to talk about, but I don't want to deprive the student of the necessary material. Shifting cultivation, I expect the students to come up with some kind of map drawing there. It may be the world, that may be South Asia, then you'll bring it down to India. We will be giving there different kinds of shifting cultivations, the varieties across the country. And I'll give a briefing on the legislation that had banned shifting cultivation in India based on Forest Conservation Act. And we will talk a bit about the punishments, the comforts given to people like biogas, how environmentally hazardous it is, how it became environmentally hazardous, because there are case studies given by Elwin himself Elvin was talking about the Naga tribes who maintained these zooming areas. The zooming areas, that is nothing but the shifting cultivation areas, properly demarcating into small pockets. You're moving from one pocket to the other, and there are some pockets that are left untouched. These are called the sacred grooves. So rest of the area you might be exploiting, but the sacred groove you leave it, so that would take care of whatever environmental thing is required. And because such a massive region is available to you when you are moving from one side to the other, by the time you complete the cycle, you are in a position to see rejuvenation happening in the rest of the areas. Population was also manageable. You are also able to move around, but from outside, when pressure is building, your zooming area is coming down, and then in such circumstances, if you are moving from one place to the other, you don't have the time of rejuvenation there, and then you blame it on the tribal that you are eroding the soil. That's how things are. Somewhere somebody has done something, my area is shrinking, and then you are blaming me for what I was doing for centuries. It's as simple as it is. So it's like there is nothing like a universal good. At one point of time you found that it was right, and later you don't find it anymore there. So I'll be writing a few things which आप बाद में पढ़िएगा आराम से, देखिए क्या लिखा है. So many things out there. Casually you can read what they are growing, chilies, potatoes, how they are growing, what is the law saying, permitting. I'm sure you'll enjoy. Certain problems, even if you don't enjoy, you should write about them. When it comes to the topic of land alienation, what we mean by land alienation is tribal is getting alienated from his land, from his geographical regions. See, there is a traditional way of answering this question. One is how things were happening historically. That's how we write in general in anthropology. So what I tried to do was I categorized the sequence into those. At one point of time, there was an ousting of the tribals by certain people, meaning physically dragging them out of their territories. Couple of examples we try to give about each of them. At certain other places, there was a gradual takeover of the region. Certain other places, because there was a primitive agriculture, you are driving them into some kind of a primitive agriculture, depriving them or asking them to stay at one place, making them sedentary people. This we call peasantization of the tribals. The same agricultural communities, agricultural tribes, with the introduction of industrialization, etc., becoming depeasantized. I want to lay roads and railways for your benefit, so get out of the way. That is one way of doing things. Several things, they come as shock to us. I remember my own childhood example. So the residence was a very remote tribal residence. Generally, occasionally we were brought to some kind of a town for some, whenever he has to do something, my father, so we used to accompany him. So this was the first occasion where I had seen something, because we were used to see the iron pressing thing, जिसमें आप कोयला वगैरह डालते हो, and then even now in the urban areas people use the dhobis or non-dhobis who are presenting themselves as dhobis. Because इस्त्री वाले का बहुत डिमांड है सिटी में, तो इवन इफ़ यू आर नॉट एन इस्त्री फेलो और यू आर नॉट अ धोबी ट्रेडिशनली, you are taking up that job. So that is one kind of a caste mobility that is happening. So in the hotel or guest house, I don't remember that setting, I had seen that old time telephone, jo uthao aur round round karo kind of a thing. I got so very excited. I didn't know that it was a telephone. My immediate question was, हमारे पास भी है ये इस्त्री, इधर भी है. I thought that it is an istri. I don't know why this round thing was there. And then my father explains, no, this is not that. And then things have changed so fast that we have seen different kinds of phones. And you have seen the cell phones and cell phone size coming down from a sanduk to a hand, no, a palm thing. And then now once again that is becoming bigger. Now people want to show that, see, I have this big Apple phone, whatever. So the other day when my son was saying, "Aapke paas Apple phone hai," I was wondering where I was and where the little fellow is. I was mistaking a telephone for Nistri, and then kind of a thing. Time passes, no? Kind of. So those are the cultural shocks actually. I remember first time when my father took us to some kind of a good hotel, जो नींबू पानी लाए थे, इसका क्या करना है मेरे तो समझ में आया नहीं. अब आई वॉज एक्चुअली नॉट ए पर्सन की जो मिला उसको उठा के मुंह में डाल लो. कुछ लोगों ने वैसा भी कर लिया, बट देन आई वॉज वेटिंग फॉर माई फादर, सो वी वुड फिनिश आवर फूड अ लिटिल अर्ली. सो फादर सेज वो हाथ धोने के लिए, मुझे ये आई डिडंट गेट ए थॉट दैट वो उसी में आप गंदगी धो. The kind of uncleanly practice we have in the modern world, उसी में धो रहे हो kind of a thing. मुझे वो thought आया नहीं. So I picked up one bowl and then वहाँ से निकाला, हाथ डाला, हाथ में धोया. Then my father said, no, this is not the way you do it. No, you. फिर then because साइड में जो टेबल था उस पर मेरा कज़न बैठा था, वो मुझसे भी ज़रा छोटा था, वो मुझसे भी देहात से आया था. तो वो तो नींबू मत लिया और पी लिया. वो कह रहा था कि गर्म पानी क्यों रखे, ठंडा रखते तो ज़रा अच्छा बन जाता, काइंड ऑफ ए थिंग. सो हम देहात वाले तो ऐसे ही हैं, नो, काइंड ऑफ. These urban things we really can't actually relish, kind of. आप उधर धो भी तो फिर वॉशरूम में जाएंगे, अच्छा सा दांत वांत साफ करेंगे, फिर बाहर निकलेंगे, kind of a thing. That's how life is, no? Kind of. We call disappearance of useful traits. Disappearance of useful traits is this one. Cleanliness you forget. एंड आजकल तो ये भी फैशन निकला कि आप ब्रश नहीं करते हो, माउथ वॉश थोड़ा सा गॉगल करते हो, और व्हाट इज़ देयर इनसाइड द टीथ गॉड नोस, बट बाहर से तो हो ही जाता है, काइंड ऑफ थिंग. एंड बाकी जो भी बचा है वो अंदर जाकर अंदर ही अंदर जो करना है. दैट्स हाउ थिंग्स आर. डिसअपियरेंस ऑफ यूजफुल ट्रेट्स. राइट डाउन. We are writing about land alienation. Don't get me wrong when I give these examples. These are the things that we see in the life day in and day out. It's only that कई सारे लोग ये सब अंदर छुपा कर बाहर से nice and decent gentlemen बनते हैं. But we are not the people who try to kind of. लिखिए. Land alienation refers to alienating tribals from their land through various means currently affecting over 88% of tribals. Currently affecting over 88% of tribals at different scales. Keep writing. When compared to the mainstream, farmers in simple societies have much smaller land holdings and infertile lands due to gradual pushing of tribals into inaccessible resource-wise scarce regions by the elements of culture contact. In some places, though tribals are official landowners, the loopholes in the legislations and cultural practices make the non-tribals the real owners. For example, the Muslim and Hindu moneylenders in Tarai regions of UP and the Gujars and Bhils in Rajasthan being eliminated by Sahukars, the Badagas and Kurumbas of Tamil Nadu displaced by several people, beginning with the British, throughout history. Full stop. Thus, the erstwhile landowners are converted into landless and agricultural laborers. Right in the next paragraph. LP Vidyarthi identifies the causes of land alienation as number 1, elimination or ousting of tribals from fertile lands by the mainstream superior agricultural people. For example, In the western central India, the tribes of Bhils and Bhilalas, were pushed out of their lands during the 12th century by the Rajputs. It was succeeded by Maratha occupations from 15th to 18th century, with the Bhils gradually pushed into ecologically backward regions. Secondly, slow and non-violent takeover. By the money lenders. Moneylender represents the mainstream society as the single most powerful exploiter at the individual level. Increasing tribal indebtedness. Traditionally, tribals are criticized for extravagant expenditure, and with the tribal cooperatives and government banks failing to provide tribals are attracted to the moneylenders, risking their lives. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, the Korwas, K-O-R-W-A, the Korwa are exploited by the neighboring Muslim moneylenders. Traditionally, continue writing there, traditionally the Korwa have a culture of alcoholism, with the ban of brewing their own liquor. They resorted to IMFL. Resulting in indebtedness. Thirdly, Indian made foreign liquor. Indian made foreign liquor. What is the other name? మీరు అసలు చిలిపి. మన బ్రాండ్ ఏంటి? సారీ, మనది అంటే మీరు ఇంకో రకంగా అనుకోవచ్చు. I had to say something, but thirdly, primitive agriculture. Primitive agriculture. Tribals generally have low yielding farmlands. They have preference for low yielding coarse crops due to lack of technology and market access. With low quality cattle and technology, when they are pushed into monoculture, with a newfound desire to cultivate the mainstream crops, they are pushed into expensive agriculture and indebtedness. When I say indebtedness, that automatically leads to land alienation. Come to the fourth one. Industrialization and urbanization. Several minor projects, large-scale dams, industries, nuclear establishments, throughout independent Indian history, resulted in tribal land alienation. Leave some space there so that you can write good number of examples. Industries, dams, nuclear, whatever. Write the fifth one. Infrastructure projects, especially the linear projects of roads and railways, though considered less harmful for tribals, result in displacement at the same time increasing access to mainstream society. The railway projects in the Rajmahal Hills, Nilgiris, Palani Hills, Palani Hills, opened the tribals that were earlier isolated. Sixthly, economic activities such as ecotourism projects and environmental conservation measures mainstream market economies, governmental activities in the tribal areas, resulting in a residence of mainstream people in the tribal belt led to modern money transactions. The whole lot of interactions with the mainstream world seem to have played a key role in the tribal deprivation with the tribal choosing to give up his claims due to illiteracy. In the case of shifting cultivators and nomadic populations, the existing legislations not recognizing community rights did the necessary damage. Hence, according to Devar Commission, the problem of land alienation shall be studied from three fronts. Number one, lack of proper legislations. Secondly, ignorance of tribals. Thirdly, the lacunae in the existing legislations. They were examined. The initiatives such as land reforms, and how they impacted the tribals. According to him, the tribal beneficiaries were far from being recognized for land distribution. During the 1990s, the writings by National Human Rights Commission referred to how the Dalits and tribals were getting further deprived of the opportunities due to the incoming MNCs. Sir, try to prepare a note on this, you scribble somewhere. Impact of MNCs on protecting land rights of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Sir, that was somewhere in 2006 or 7. There was something called Asian Social Summit. Asian Social Summit was held in Hyderabad. See, it is such conferences I insist that the students should attend. If at all something happens in your city, you should definitely attend such conferences, because they give you the kind of material that your exam needs. I'll see if I could find, there were some beautiful write-ups circulated in that conference. One of them I really liked was how the scheduled castes were clearly, very smartly kept aside in the case of the consideration to get land. See, if it was land reforms, at least there was a possibility of some of the lower castes being able to get from the haves whatsoever. Theoretically, at least land could be transferred from the haves to the have-nots. But when a big fellow is coming, when MNC is coming, the priorities altogether get altered, and you do not get figured out in the long list, at least towards the end. So, if at all possible, I would try to see if those write-ups are made available to you. There is a Class C tables being given, and then region-wise, they were trying to tell the MNCs how they were trying to disturb the prospects of particular caste groups and particular tribal communities, right down there. In some of the states such as AP, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan, Tenancy Acts, scheduled areas, and land transfer legislations were brought in. Scheduled areas and land transfer legislations were brought in to prevent transfer of tribal land transfer of tribal land to the non-tribals. The appointment of scheduled areas and Scheduled Tribes Commission, 1961. Scheduled Areas and Scheduled Tribes Commission, 1961, provided safeguards against land alienation. Some of its recommendations include, write in bullet points, transfer of land from tribal to the non-tribal should be completely banned. Secondly, the concerned district collectors to be given higher powers to decide on such issues. Thirdly, in the case of bigger developmental projects, awareness campaigns to be held, making the stakeholders, making the tribals the stakeholders in the decision-making process. Right, in the next paragraph. For B.D. Sharma, the recommendations definitely provide list of ideals. So that's where I'm stopping. In your next class, if it is my class, if it is on Sunday or Monday, the topics that I should be talking about will be social change among tribals. ఇంకొక సెంటెన్స్ అయితే అయిపోద్ది మాస్టర్, కొంచెం ఓపి పట్టండి. Social change among tribals and tracing the evolution of tribal revolts. That is the second topic, tracing the evolution of tribal revolts. Thirdly, I will be talking about NGOs and their role in tribal development. Those are the three. Have a good time, and you can fill your planner. So one of them was the video that we have seen on the Jarawa. So one more you will be watching back home. Second one was culture contact and impact on tribals, industrialization, urbanization, land alienation.